Good Sunday evening. I wanted to continue our thoughts on Sunday nights as we're Sunday nights in the Psalm. We are trying to connect with the Psalms. What can we learn? And so, again, we want to revisit a Psalm that is really relevant during this time. And if you wanted to title it, I guess you could say Confidence in Crisis. And it's Psalm 77. If you'd like to turn there and follow along, we're going to look at part of this Psalm tonight, and then next Sunday night, Lord willing, we'll look at some more of this psalm and how it can apply to us and how we can use it and be encouraged by it as we study it together. Psalm 77 is a psalm of Asaph. Now, as many of the psalms we study, there's many that are ascribed to David, but this is considered a psalm of Asaph. Now, Asaph was one of the members of the tribe of Levi, whom David put in charge of the worship at the tabernacle. We can go back to 1 Chronicles 6 and verse 39. But there's one thing that you can say about Asaph and appreciate about Asaph, and that's that he was pretty straightforward. He was honest. Asaph writes down his emotions while dealing with his problems, and reading his situation can help us. It helps us relate to the feelings he has, because we oftentimes have similar feelings as we go through difficulties in life. Now, previously, Asaph questioned God about the circumstances that were going on in his life. He found himself in, and he questioned God. But here in Psalm 77, Asaph is in crisis again. And we're going to read about how he deals with this situation. And again, hopefully this will be an encouragement to us and will help us in some way. If you look at this psalm, the first couple of verses, my voice, he says, rises to God, and I will cry aloud. My voice rises to God, and he will hear me. In the day of my trouble, he says, I sought the Lord. In the night, my hand was stretched out. Without weariness, my soul refused to be comforted. Now, Asaph begins the psalm by recording how he has been crying out to the Lord. And the first two verses describe how Asaph was seeking after the Lord as he's going through this. In the midst of this turmoil, he's seeking the Lord. And you know, any person who has ever endured a trial, and that's all of us, endured suffering, emotional pain, endured any life difficulties, relates to the words of Asaph in these first two verses. You know, Asaph is literally crying to God for help. Maybe you found yourself in that situation before, literally crying out to God for help, reaching for God's hand in whatever it is that you're dealing with. The last clause of verse 2 especially describes the nature of suffering. It says, and my soul refused to be comforted. You know, nothing can be said to Asaph, it seems, that it's going to make him feel better. The ordeal is so great that there is no place to find comfort. Now, we don't know specifically what Asaph is enduring, but we can relate to the circumstance where we could not find any comfort or release. Maybe we can think about that time in our life where we just didn't see that there was anything that was going to help us through. But look at the next few verses. When I remember God, he says, then I am disturbed. When I sigh, then my spirit grows faint. You have held my eyelids open. I am so troubled that I cannot speak. I have considered the days of old, the years of long ago. I will remember my song, he says, in the night. I will meditate with my heart, and my spirit ponders. What you find here with Asaph is he's basically remembering the good old days. You've ever heard somebody say that? Maybe you yourself have used that phrase. Remember long ago, remember the good old days. You know, it always seems like times past were a lot better than times present. It always seems like the times that we used to live in were a lot better for us, or we were going through easier times than we are now. And verses 3 through 6 seems to be Asaph recalling what we often call those good old days. In verse 5, Asaph says, I thought about the former days, the year of long ago. I remembered my songs in the night. You know, it's amazing how often trials set apart a new time of life events that cause a person to try to remember back to before the ordeal started. Asaph seems to remember back before this ordeal that he's going through, and as a time that seems to be so long ago. He remembers the former days when he says he had pleasure in the night, those songs that he remembered, those positive things. And so as we come to chapter 77, verses 7 through 9, we have really 6 rhetorical questions. Asaph records the feelings of every person in the middle of a difficult trial. And these feelings are recorded as he asks these 6 questions to which he seeks the answer for. One of the questions is, will the Lord reject forever? You know, it's hard not to have the feeling of being rejected by God in the middle of difficulties, especially when we allow the difficulties to be the only thing we see. It's as if, God, where are you in whatever it is I'm going through? The second question is, will he never show his favor again? You know, one of the difficulties of a trial is that it seems like the trial will never end. This is never going to be over. This is going to continue all the time. We feel rejected and that things will never be good again. The third question is, has his unfailing love, has it vanished forever? You know, Asaph wonders if the blessings of God's love will ever return to him. A fourth question is, has his promise failed for all time? You know, one of the promises of God was that he will never leave or forsake his people. Hebrews 13:5, go back to Deuteronomy 31 and verse 6. Number 5, has God forgotten to be merciful? You know, Asaph wonders if God's mercy has run out. God, are you out of mercy? Has he used up all of God's mercy? So now he must be enduring suffering because of that. Asaph feels like that. And in the midst of a trial, we often feel the same way. And the 6th question that he asks is, has he in anger withheld his compassion? You know, we may even feel like we're experiencing the wrath of God because of the circumstances that we're enduring. So while in the middle of suffering, we're going to read about what Asaph did to overcome these feelings. If you look at verses 10, 11, and 12, you'll notice what he says. Verses 10 through 12 record Asaph's determination in the middle of the trial. And I'll let you read that for yourself, and we'll just kind of highlight these things. There's 3 things really that Asaph says he will do. Number 1 is he's going to remember the deeds of the Lord. You know, we have repeatedly been instructed in the Psalms that it is important to remember the past deeds of God while we are especially in distress. When we're going through whatever it is we're going through, remember the good things that God has done. And we'll see Asaph instruct us here as well do that. Number 2, he's going to remember the miracles. You know, Asaph also remembers the history of God's love toward his people. The followers of God didn't have miracles in their own day to look for. They had to recall the miracles of the Exodus and the conquest of Canaan and know that God continues his love for them because of what God did in the past. And then the third thing he says he's going to do is he's going to meditate on all of God's work and consider all of God's mighty deeds. You know, this is the past, and think of the current good things that God is doing in your life. It's easy to only dwell on the negative problems that are taking place in the here and now. But we have to move past and think about the many blessings we're still experiencing. You see, we've got to see the good in the middle of the bad. And so he says, I'm going to meditate on all of God's works, and I'm going to consider God's mighty deeds, even though I'm enduring what I'm enduring. And so here in the first part of Psalm 77, we see Asaph. We see what he's going through. We see what he's dealing with. And we see how he says he's going to respond. Next time, we're going to look at what Asaph says he will do as far as remembering God. And so I trust and I hope that as you study this psalm, you'll be encouraged as we go through crisis. May God bless you.